Imagine dedicating your entire life to your son, caring for him, protecting him, being there for every victory and every setback. Now, imagine discovering in the cruelest way possible that on the most important day of his life, there would be no place for you. That's exactly what happened to me. When I asked about the wedding date, my daughter-in-law's answer came with a cold laugh. You've already missed the big day. From that moment on, my life was never the same. What followed is a story of pain, silence, and resilience that you need to hear. If this story touched you, subscribe now and follow every chapter of this journey. Here, you'll never be alone. I will never forget that moment. It still echoes inside me, like an open wound that won't heal. I was in the dining room, sitting at the table where I had served so many family dinners, where I watched my son grow up, study, smile, share secrets, and even cry on the hard days. It was a sacred space to meet the heart of the house, the place I kept for moments of affection. And it was right there that the cruelest sentence I've ever heard in my life was spoken. I asked as gently as I could, never imagining the storm about to swallow me, "Have you set a date for the wedding?" It sounds harmless, doesn't it? A mother asking her son and his girlfriend. Just curiosity, a happy kind of anticipation. I was already dreaming of seeing my boy, the one I once carried in my arms wearing a suit, waiting for his bride. I pictured helping with the preparations, choosing flowers, weighing in on the music, maybe even dancing with him in the middle of the celebration. But instead of a loving answer, instead of a knowing smile, I heard a dry laugh. It wasn't joyful, the laugh of someone sharing happiness. It was a mocking laugh, dripping with disdain. She looked straight into my eyes, as if savoring the humiliation she was about to inflict, and said, "You already missed the big day." In that moment, the world stopped. My body went cold, as if all the blood had fled my veins. My mouth went dry. I couldn't breathe. I tried to smile, the way someone does when they don't get the joke, but my heart already knew there was no joke at all. You already missed the big day. Those words weren't just information, they were a sentence, a conviction, an exile. It felt like she had ripped out a piece of my own life, like she had drawn a line between the past when I was a present, important, mother and the present, when I was disposable, excluded, invisible. And what hurt most wasn't the sentence itself. What cut deepest was my son's silence. He was right there, sitting beside her. I turned to him, waiting for a reaction, a defense. That's not how it is, Mom, hang on. But nothing came. He looked down, he shrank into himself, as if he were ashamed or worse, as if he agreed. In that second, I understood something I had never wanted to accept. I wasn't just losing space in his life, I had already been replaced. I could have screamed. I could have slammed my fist on the table, demanded explanations, cried right there in front of them, but I didn't. I froze. Inside me, there was a storm, outrage, shock, sadness, anger. On the outside, I was mute. I swallowed hard, the way I've swallowed so many smaller things, like the way she turned up her nose at my cooking, as if my seasonings were inferior to her mother's, or how she looked away whenever I tried to start a more intimate conversation, or how my son so talkative with me went quiet whenever she was around. In that moment, all those memories rushed back at once. Together, they told me a painful truth. I had been pushed out long before that sentence. I just hadn't noticed, or maybe I didn't want to. I sat there in front of them, feeling like I'd been slapped. My mind screamed, "It's your son's wedding, the day you've waited for your whole life. How can they take that from you? How can they laugh in your face, as if it were just a cruel joke?" But I said nothing. I only smiled a broken smile, trying to hide the pain. Maybe because I still believed it couldn't be true. Maybe because I hoped that at any moment my son would say, "Calm down, Mom. She's kidding. Did you really think I'd get married without you?" But he didn't. He stayed silent. And that silence was more devastating than 1,000 words. That night, when I closed the door behind them, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. It wasn't a simple cry. It was a deep lament from the soul, like I was in mourning. And, in a way, I was mourning for a son who, suddenly, no longer seemed to belong to me. As the tears fell, I remembered the day he was born. I was exhausted, sweaty, radiant, staring at that baby in my arms. I promised then that I would do anything for him. I would protect him, care for him, always be his safe harbor. And now, who was protecting me from the pain he was allowing me to feel? In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself I'd misunderstood. Maybe she'd phrased it badly. Maybe it was just a tasteless joke. But deep down, I knew. The coldness in her eyes left no room for doubt. That sentence was a message. You're not welcome. I started noticing details I had ignored before. Phone calls where my son seemed in a hurry to hang up. Lunch invitations that never happened. Plans I only learned about later, through social media. It was like I was a spectator to his life, watching from the outside with no right to take part. And I kept asking myself, where did I go wrong? I wasn't a perfect mother, of course. No one is. But I gave him everything I had. I was there for every birthday, every school performance, every cold, every broken heart. I cheered for every victory he had. And now, it felt like none of it mattered. Her sentence kept echoing. You already missed the big day. It was cruel not only for the exclusion, but for the certainty. As if she had slammed the door, locked it, and thrown away the key. As if I had never had any right to be there. And the worst part was seeing my son accept it. To this day, when I close my eyes, I see the scene in slow motion. Her laugh, her eyes, his silence. It's like a nightmare I can't wake up from. In that instant, I realized I wasn't just being excluded from a party. I was being excluded from my son's life. And that, for a mother, is a pain without a name. I wanted to believe it was just the start of a misunderstanding, that there would still be time to reclaim my place. But deep down, a part of me already knew that cruel laugh was the omen of an even greater humiliation. And I, whether I wanted to or not, was already walking toward the loneliest night of my life. Looking back now, I can see the signs were there from the beginning. Small gestures, stray words, looks that I maybe out of naivete or hope chose to ignore. The truth is, every wound starts with a fissure. And mine began long before that cruel sentence that still echoes in my memory. I remember clearly the day I met her. My son was nervous, almost like a shy teenager, even though he was already a grown man. He said, "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." My heart filled with anticipation. I always dreamed of seeing my son truly happy, with someone who loved him for real. I prepared the house like it was a solemn occasion. I cooked his favorite dish, set the table with my best dinnerware. I wanted to make a good impression, to show that my home would always be a home for both of them. When she walked through the door, beautiful, elegantly, could tell right away he was smitten, and I wanted to believe there was something good in that young woman. I smiled, hugged her, welcomed her. I asked gentle questions, tried to keep things light, but I soon sensed something different in her eyes. She watched me the way someone evaluates, measures, judges, compares. There was no spark of empathy. From the first moment, I was something to be tolerated or eliminated. At dinner, as I served the food, she thanked me politely, but hardly touched what I put on her plate. She pretended to be satisfied, but I noticed the look she gave my son, as if to say silently, "I'd prefer something else." I ignored it. I convinced myself it was just shyness, maybe youthful fussiness. I didn't want to believe there was a barrier there, an invisible wall that would grow with time. That night, when they left, my son seemed happy. And that, for me, was what mattered most. If he smiled, I smiled too. I didn't know that would be the start of a path where my smile would depend less and less on me and more on how she decided to look at me. The next months were a mix of hope and frustration. I tried hard to please her. Little lunch invitations, kind messages, carefully chosen gifts, but her reaction was always lukewarm, distant. I remember making a special cake once because my son had mentioned she liked chocolate. I spent the whole morning in the kitchen, remembering when I used to bake for him as a boy. When they arrived, I served it with enthusiasm. She smiled politely, took a tiny bite, and said, "It's good, but my mom makes it differently." A simple sentence, but a cutting one. It wasn't about the cake, it was about me. It was a reminder, you'll never be enough. And again, my son said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't affirm me. He just gave an awkward smile, like he didn't want a scene. Moments like that kept repeating in little ways, a comment about my clothes, a remark about the house decor, a veiled comparison between me and her family. Every gesture seemed to carry the message that no matter what I did, I would never be accepted. And I swallowed it all. I swallowed because I believed my son's love could be a bridge, that in the end she'd see me as an ally, not a threat. But the fissures multiplied, and with them, my hope wore thin. I also began to notice a change in my son. He, who had always been so open with me, became more guarded. Long conversations grew short. The spontaneous phone calls grew rare. When we were together, he seemed constantly worried about what she might think, like every word I said could be used against me later. There was an invisible tension. I felt that any wrong move would make me seem intrusive, controlling, inconvenient, and that was cruel, because I never wanted to control anything. I just wanted to be present. One day, for example, he called to tell me about a win at work. We talked excitedly, and I said, "Son, let's celebrate. Come have dinner at my place." He hesitated, said he'd ask her. In the end, they never came. Later I found out through social media they'd gone to celebrate somewhere else, with her family. That kind of silent exclusion became routine. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, just coincidences, but the pain piled up. It was like losing ground little by little without the right to protest. And inside me, a question grew heavier. Is he leaving me behind because he chose his own life, or because someone is pushing to keep me out? Over time, I realized it wasn't just carelessness. It was intentional. Every gesture of hers felt calculated to push me away. And what hurt most was seeing my son, maybe out of love, maybe out of fear of conflict, accept everything in silence. I was a tolerated guest, not a mother who'd always been there, and that feeling is devastating. The first cracks were turning into deep fractures, and deep down, I already knew that sooner or later those fractures would open into chasms. What I didn't know yet was how far I would fall. I didn't know that one day all those tiny exclusions would add up to the cruelest point of all, being excluded from my own son's wedding. And that's when pain stops being just a wound. It becomes humiliation. A mother's heart senses before the mind accepts. Days before the wedding, I carried a quiet anguish. There were no invitations, no mention of preparations, no place reserved for me. And even so, I clung to hope. I kept telling myself it was all a misunderstanding, that soon he'd come to me, smiling, and say, "Mom, of course you'll be there. You're part of me." But that moment never came. On the day the wedding happened, I didn't know. I woke up early as usual, made my coffee, tidied the house. It was a Saturday like any other, or so it seemed. But there was something in the air, a restlessness I couldn't name. I picked up my phone to check messages. Nothing. No call, no heads up. I opened social media, and that's where the final blow hit me. The first photo I saw was him, my son, in a suit, handsome, radiant, with the look only a groom has. Beside him, she, dressed in white, smiling as if she had conquered the world. Behind them, an altar decorated with flowers I never helped choose, a party I never saw being planned, and all around, familiar faces, his childhood friends, relatives I hadn't seen in ages, people smiling, celebrating, everyone but me. It felt like a knife to the chest. My hands trembled. I nearly dropped the phone. I read the comments, the congratulations, the heart emojis. Everyone shared in the joy. But no one noticed the absence. No one asked, "Where's his mother?" I was alone, locked in my house, while out there they celebrated the most important day of my son's life. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Each new photo posted was another blow. I saw the moment they said "I do," her tears running down her face, the applause. I saw him hugging some relatives, my relatives, who smiled and cheered as if I didn't exist. I saw the couple's first dance, joy etched into every detail. And I, on this side of the screen, phone in hand, was just an unwanted spectator. I watched my own exclusion in real time. The house felt colder, quieter than ever. The clock ticked so loudly it mocked me, mocked the time I'd wasted believing I would be part of that story. I sat on the couch and cried until I had no strength left. It wasn't just sadness, it was humiliation. It was the certainty that someone decided I didn't deserve to be there. The most unbearable pain wasn't missing the party. It was being denied the right to stand by him at that altar, to witness with my own eyes the fulfillment of a dream I had followed since the day he was born. I was there when he took his first steps, when he lost his first tooth, when he got over his fear of riding a bike. I was there when he graduated, when he landed his first job. I was there for every milestone in his life, but for the greatest one, I was erased. And the cruelty of it was that there was no explanation, no message, no justification, just absence, just silence. As the hours passed, messages started coming in from acquaintances. Some said, "Wow, what a beautiful wedding. You must be so emotional." I didn't have the courage to answer. How could I tell the truth without feeling even more humiliated? So I kept quiet. I hid behind vague excuses, as if silence hurt less than admitting I'd been left out of the most important day of my own son's life. I remember walking into his old bedroom, the one he grew up in. I sat on the bed and hugged the pillow like it was him. Memories flooded in, the nights he slept feverish and I stayed by his side. The little notes he wrote me on Mother's Day, the way he said Mom when he needed comfort. And now he was saying, wife, and me. I had become just a shadow. It felt like grief, like I'd lost someone who was still alive, but who no longer belonged to me. And in a way, that's exactly what it was. That night, when the party lights went out and the world slept, I stayed awake. There was no resting after a pain that big. I stared up at the dark ceiling and asked myself, what did I do to deserve this? The injustice burned inside me. It was a mix of outrage, indignation, and sadness. How can a mother be forgotten like that? How can someone who gave everything be treated like nothing? As much as it hurt, one certainty took root. This wouldn't be the last time I suffered. My son's silence, my daughter-in-law's hostility, everything pointed to a lifetime of being pushed away. And deep down, I feared something even crueler, that the wedding hadn't just stolen my right to witness the big day, but had also taken my son himself. Because from that moment on, I knew there wasn't just a mother in mourning. There was a woman, a family, everything I had built until then. After the wedding, the days blurred together. I woke up, made my coffee, tidied the house, but inside, everything was broken. It was like living on hold, waiting for a phone call, a message, any sign that my son remembered me. But the silence dragged on. A cruel silence, louder than any word. I knew I couldn't bear it any longer. The humiliation of being excluded from the wedding still burned, and I needed answers. I needed to hear from his own mouth why. I wanted to believe there was some explanation that could justify the most painful absence of my life. I picked up the phone many times. I dialed his number, but my hands trembled so much I often hung up before it rang. Fear he wouldn't answer. Fear of being rejected again. But on a Sunday night, after so much crying, I decided I couldn't run anymore. I called. After a few rings, he answered. Hello, Mom. His voice hit me like relief and a knife at the same time. Relief to hear him. A knife because it sounded so far away, so cautious. Son, we need to talk. On the other end, silence. I just want to understand. Why wasn't I at your wedding? What happened? What did I do? My voice cracked. I swallowed the tears, but they escaped anyway. He took a deep breath. I could feel the weight of it. Mom, it's not simple. And right then, I knew the answer wouldn't bring comfort. In the days that followed, we set a time to meet. I wanted to look him in the eyes. I wanted to believe that face to face he wouldn't be able to deny me the truth. We chose a quiet cafe in town, away from curious looks. When he arrived, my heart raced. There was my boy, a man, now but still the same face I had cradled so many times. But something was different, a heaviness in his eyes, a caution that hurt me. We sat, he ordered coffee. I asked only for water, my stomach was too tight for anything else. Son, tell me, why wasn't I there? My voice came out low, almost a whisper. He looked away, fidgeted with the cup in his hands. Mom, things got tense. She thought it wouldn't be a good idea. My heart clenched. And you, what did you think? It's your wedding, son. Your life. Did you not want me there? He looked up for a moment, and in that brief instant, I saw pain, conflict, a boy torn in two. But then he lowered his eyes again. Mom, I didn't want any fights. I wanted peace at my wedding. And I thought, this would be better. Those words fell on me like stones. Better. Without me. I felt the ground vanish under my feet. Better. Do you really believe that? That your wedding is better without your mother? I didn't yell. My voice was steady, but full of pain. He didn't answer right away. He ran his hands over his face, at a loss for words. Mom, I love you, but I love her too. And sometimes, it feels like I can't reconcile the two. Reconcile, the word cut through me, as if I were a problem to be solved, a weight to be balanced. Not a mother, not a heart, just an obstacle. So that's what I am. A problem, a nuisance. After everything I did, everything I gave, I'm now a burden to you. He tried to hold my hand, but I pulled back. It wasn't anger, it was too much pain for that gesture. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You ripped me out of the most important day of your life. You took away my right to be by your side. And now you tell me it was to avoid a fight. Son, that's not peace. That's cowardice." He closed his eyes, as if my words were knives. Maybe they were, but they were true. The meeting ended in silence. He didn't have the courage to give me a definitive answer. He didn't say he wanted me back. He didn't say he was sorry. He just left me with an even bigger emptiness than before. When I walked out of that cafe, the cold wind hit my face, but the pain inside me was colder. Deep down, I knew I had lost my son. Not literally, he was still alive, still walking around, but I was no longer part of his life, not the way I had always been. The wound of being excluded from the wedding was no longer an open cut. It became a scar I would carry forever, reminding me that, to him, I was no longer a priority. I went home that day with a bitter certainty. There was nothing more I could do. The decision had already been made. He had chosen silence. He had chosen her. And deep down, I realized, I hadn't just lost the wedding. I had lost my son. Life didn't go back to normal after the confrontation. How could it? I went home with a shattered heart, with the bitter certainty that my son wouldn't fight for me. He had chosen silence, and his silence said more than 1,000 words. The days that followed were a desert. I woke early, as always, but the house felt emptier than ever. I walked through the rooms and every corner echoed with memories. The kitchen table where he gulped down coffee before school. The couch where we watched movies under the same blanket. The bedroom still holding a few things he'd left behind. Everything reminded me of him, not the man who was now a husband, but the boy, the teenager, the son I raised. And that contrast was unbearable. It was like living surrounded by ghosts. I lay awake at night, my mind racing. I replayed every scene, her cruel laugh, his silence, the wedding photos, the conversations I never had, the hugs that were denied me. There was a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen, and the worst part was facing the outside world. People spoke of the wedding as if it had been a beautiful, perfect celebration. Some friends asked, "How was it for you, dear? Did you cry with emotion?" I smiled, lied, deflected, because how could I admit the truth? How could I say that I, the mother, had been left out? Shame consumed me as much as the pain did. It felt like a double humiliation, first the exclusion, then the need to hide it. I started avoiding public places, the bakery, the market, even church. I knew I'd face curious looks, prying questions, and I couldn't bear to hear, "But why weren't you there?" Isolation became my prison. I hid in my house as if the walls could shield me, but really, they were my captivity. In those lonely hours, the mind plays cruel tricks. I began to ask myself, did I fail as a mother? Was I too strict? Did he pull away because I didn't know how to love him the right way? Guilt seeped in like poison. Even knowing it wasn't fair, even remembering everything I'd done for him, I still blamed myself. Because that's what mothers do. Even when we're the ones hurt, we believe it's our fault. Tears became routine. I cried while washing dishes, making the bed, staring out the window. But these weren't ordinary tears. They were the tears of mourning. Mourning for someone still alive who no longer belonged to me. Social media became my enemy. Every new photo of them was a stab. I saw trips, smiles, parties. I saw him hugging her family, laughing with her friends, building a life where I didn't exist. Every click reinforced the feeling that I had been replaced. I tried to step away from the internet too, but it was useless. One phone buzz, one notification, and the pain came roaring back. One night I dreamed of him. In the dream he was small again, running through the living room, calling, "Mom, look at me." I woke with my heart racing, eyes brimming with tears, and I realized that, in reality, there was no more look at me. There was only absence. The house, once full of noises, now felt like a tomb, and I, alone, was the keeper of its silence. With time, the pain stopped being an open wound. It became something quiet, constant, like a stone on my chest that never moves. I no longer expected phone calls, no longer expected invitations, no longer expected explanations. What was left was to survive each day, each memory, each question I had to dodge. And yet, deep down, there was a tiny flame, almost out, that refused to die. Because as broken as I was, there was still a hope that one day, somehow, I would find myself again. But that rebirth wouldn't be easy. Before it, I would have to face the harshest truth. My son had chosen a life without me. And I, somehow, would have to learn to live without him. There's no quick cure for a broken heart. The wounds I carried didn't close overnight. For weeks, maybe months, I walked like a shadow inside myself. But in the middle of that darkness, something began to change. It was on an ordinary morning when I opened the window and the sun poured in. The light touched my face and, for the first time in a long time, I felt warmth. A warmth that didn't come from the past or the painful memories, but from the present. It was as if life, quiet and patient, was calling me back. In that instant, a question rose inside me. How long will you let yourself die for someone who's still alive but no longer chooses you? The question hit like a punch, but also like an invitation. I realized that if I stayed trapped in the pain, I would end up erasing not only the good memory of my son but also my own existence. And I couldn't allow that, not after everything I've faced in life, not after so many battles fought and won. Little by little, I started taking small steps. I went out again, even if only to buy bread at the bakery. I greeted neighbors, traded shy smiles. Every small gesture was a victory. It felt like learning to breathe again. Solitude, once a prison, became a space for reflection. I began writing in a notebook, pouring out what I didn't dare say out loud. Words of pain, but also of discovery. I realized that behind the wound, there was still a woman. A woman who existed before she became a mother and who, somehow, was still here. I revisited things I'd always loved but had abandoned along the way. I picked up old books, returned to recipes that gave me pleasure, even let myself play loud music while cleaning the house. Small things, but they reminded me who I was. I also sought support. I found a group of mothers in an online community, women who, like me, carried stories of ingratitude, estrangement, children who had chosen other paths. There, I discovered I wasn't alone. Each story was a mirror, each shared tear, an invisible hug. That quiet network gave me strength. It wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about learning to live despite it. At one point, I looked in the mirror and noticed something surprising. My face wasn't marked only by sadness anymore. There was a new firmness in my gaze, as if, after so much crying, I'd found a hidden spring of courage. I began taking better care of myself. I cut my hair, bought a new outfit, started going for evening walks. Each small gesture was an act of resistance. I was telling myself, you're still here. You still deserve to live. Slowly, the emptiness my son left began to be filled by other forms of life. Old friends reappeared. New people drew near. It wasn't the same, it never would be. But it was enough to remind me love can exist in different forms, in different places. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt laughter revisit my lips. Not that cruel laugh that wounded me, but a true laugh, born of hope. I still feel his absence. It still hurts to remember the wedding. The wound of being excluded still bleeds. But now, the pain isn't all I am. It's part of me, yes, but not my definition. I discovered I don't have to die a little each day because of the choice he made. I am still a mother. I am still a woman. I am still life. And that realization was liberating. I realized that if they tried to bury me, they forgot an important detail. I am a seed. And seeds, when buried, don't die. They are reborn. Today, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day my son will knock on my door. Maybe not. Either way, I'm no longer lost, because even after the exclusion, even after the humiliation, I found in myself something no one can take, the ability to begin again. Time doesn't erase everything, but it teaches. When I remember her cruel laugh, his silence, the wedding photos without me, I still feel a pang in my chest. The pain hasn't vanished completely, maybe it never will. But I've learned I can carry it without letting it destroy me. I spent so long believing my identity was tied to being a mother that being cut out of my son's life felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't. It was only the end of one phase, painful, bitter, unjust, and the beginning of another. Little by little, I realized that despite his absence, I was still breathing. Despite the emptiness, I still had a voice. Despite the exclusion, I still had worth. That realization was like opening a window in a dark room. The light came in slowly, shyly, but enough to show me life went on and that I had the right to go on with it. True liberation began the day I told myself, You will not beg for love. You will not beg for presents. You will not beg for respect. That doesn't mean I stopped loving my son. I never will. A mother's love is stubborn. It survives everything, even ingratitude. But I understood that love cannot be humiliation. Loving is not erasing yourself until you disappear. I decided to set boundaries. I decided my life would not be defined by his absence, but by my own presence. And for someone who spent so long dimmed, that is a quiet revolution. I started writing letters not to him, but to myself. Letters remembering all I did, all I lived, all the battles I fought alone. Those letters reminded me I'm not a void. I am story. I am memory. I am endurance. And with each word, it was as if I were stitching together the torn pieces of my soul. With time, I understood that revenge would bring no peace. What I needed wasn't to punish, but to free myself from guilt, from shame, from the idea that I wasn't enough. It wasn't me who failed. He chose, she decided, and I cannot carry the weight of choices that aren't mine. Accepting that was hard, but it was also freeing. I stopped asking, where did I go wrong? And started telling myself, you did what you could, you were a mother, and no one can erase that. Today, when I walk down the street, I no longer bow my head. If someone asks about the wedding, I take a breath and tell the truth. I wasn't invited. And when I say it, I don't feel only pain anymore. I feel strength, too, because facing the truth is an act of courage. Being excluded from the wedding was, yes, a deep wound, but it was also a turning point that taught me to look at myself. I discovered I am more than the mother I was. I am a woman. I am life. I am story. And to all the mothers who carry similar pains, I say, you are not alone. Your tears are also mine. Your anger, your anguish, your search for justice, I know each one, but above all, your strength is mine, too. They may try to exclude us from parties, weddings, celebrations, but they cannot exclude us from what we are. Roots. And roots, even when cut at the surface, remain alive underground. I move forward, not as someone who forgets, but as someone who survived. And deep down, I know this is the greatest victory, to stay alive, whole, despite the injustice, because if one day they tried to bury me, they didn't know I am a seed, and seeds always rise again. The wedding passed, but the silence remained. Not just the absence of words, but a hollow that shouted. Every morning when I woke, the first thing I felt was his absence. Not only my adult son's absence, but the boy who used to run through the house, who called me mom with such unique sweetness. In the months that followed, every special date became an open wound. His birthday was the first. I baked a simple cake, as I did every year. I placed candles on it and set it on the table, as if at any moment he would walk through the door, smiling, saying, Mom, I knew you wouldn't forget. But the door never opened. The cake stayed untouched. The candles burned out. I sat at the table alone, my heart in pieces. That night I cried with the feeling that there was no greater pain than being ignored by the son whose birthday marked the day my life gained meaning. Then came Mother's Day. The ads on TV felt like knives, children handing flowers, embraces, presents, and me. I received only silence. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was as if the most important day to me had ceased to exist. Christmas was cruel, too. I had always been the one to bring the family together, to decorate the house, to prepare a bountiful feast. Christmas meant warmth and shared love. That year my house was dark. I didn't buy a tree. I didn't hang decorations. I didn't prepare a dinner. I spent the evening in silence, watching the blinking lights on neighboring houses from the window. While the world celebrated, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I thought about calling him. I thought about wishing him a Merry Christmas. But the fear of not being answered, of being rejected again, stopped me. So I prayed. I asked God to protect my son, wherever he was. And above all, I asked that the emptiness inside me not consume me completely. The echo of silence on those dates was deafening. It wasn't only the lack of words. It was the lack of recognition, belonging, reciprocal love. It was the certainty that in his heart I no longer held the place I once had. What made it worse was how strongly memories hit on those days. I remembered every Christmas when he ran to open presents, the birthdays when he blew out candles with a face lit by joy, the Mother's Days he came with hand-picked flowers from a school garden. Those memories were sweet and painful at once. Sweet because they reminded me how happy we had been. painful because they showed the chasm between who we were and who we'd become. It was as if the past were a vibrant color film and the present a black and white photo. And in that contrast, I asked myself, does he ever miss me? Does he ever think of me and regret it? But the answers never came. Only the echo of silence did. Over time, I realized his silence was not mere neglect. It was a choice. Accepting that felt like swallowing stones. It meant understanding that the love I gave, the love I invested, was not enough to keep my place in his life. But I also learned something important. Silence can wound, but it can also teach. It showed me I cannot depend on someone else's recognition to exist. That I am whole, even when others make me feel halved. Still, every special date is a cruel reminder. The echo of silence follows me like a shadow. Yet within that echo, I learn to hear my own voice, a voice that tells me, with quiet firmness, you are still a mother. You are still life. You are still here. And perhaps the greatest liberation is realizing that even when the world silences us, we can find strength in the sound of our own existence. Chapter 9. For a long time I hid. I hid the shame of being excluded. I hid the humiliation of not being part of the wedding. I hid the truth even from close friends because I thought admitting it would be confessing failure as a mother. But the silence weighed on me like a prison. Each time someone asked about the wedding, I forced an awkward smile and looked away. Each time I saw a proud mother post photos with her child, I shrank further inward, until one day I simply couldn't keep it in. The pain needed to come out. To my surprise, when it did, it didn't erupt as a scream. It came out as words. It began in a simple conversation with a neighbor who had known me for years. She asked, "So how was the big day?" I took a deep breath. For the first time, I answered honestly, I wasn't invited. The silence that followed felt heavy. She looked at me with shock, but not judgment, with compassion. In that moment I realized, there was nothing shameful about telling the truth. The shame wasn't mine. After that first time, the words started to flow. I told a longtime friend, then another. Instead of criticism, I received hugs. Instead of contemptuous looks, I received tears of solidarity. I discovered many were carrying similar pains. Some had been forgotten by their children when important decisions were made. Others had been sidelined by daughters or sons-in-law. In every story I heard a piece of my own. It was through that sharing that I found the courage to join a support group. There, in a circle of women, each carrying her own story of exclusion, I found a place where my voice could exist without fear. When it was my turn to speak, my throat tightened. Tears came before words. But between sobs, I said, "My son got married, and I wasn't invited." A deep silence followed. Then hands reached out. Arms enclosed me. Suddenly I was surrounded by hearts that understood. That collective embrace was the first balm I had felt in months. At every meeting my voice grew stronger. I realized telling my story was not mere venting. It was resistance. It was declaring to the world that I exist, that my pain is valid, that my exclusion does not define me. I began to write 2 long pieces, outpourings I posted in small mothers groups online. I didn't expect much. Instead, I received messages from women who said, "I went through this too. You described exactly how I feel. Thank you for putting into words what I never could." That's when I understood. My voice was not just mine. It echoed countless other silenced voices. And by speaking, I freed not only myself but those who recognized themselves in me. Shame turned into courage. Silence turned into speech. Pain turned into shared strength. Today I am no longer afraid to speak. Yes, I was excluded from my son's wedding. Yes, I was hurt, humiliated, erased. But I am not less of a mother for it. I am not less of a woman, less life, less love. On the contrary, I am stronger because I survived. I am more whole because I turned the wound into a scar. I am freer because I discovered that truth sets me free. My voice, once silenced, now echoes. If it reaches other mothers and comforts or strengthens them, then my pain was not in vain. Because the greatest revenge against exclusion is not hatred. It's the courage to exist fully, even when they try to erase us. And I chose to exist. I chose to speak. I chose never to be silent again. Chapter 10. For a long time I walked with my eyes fixed on the past, replaying her cruel laugh, his silence, the wedding photos, the empty days that followed. It was as if I were trapped in a repeating film, reliving the same scenes of pain. But time, even when slow, is a teacher. It showed me I cannot live forever inside the same wound. If I remained standing there, looking only backward, life would slip through my hands. So I decided to lift my gaze forward. Life's road does not end when someone closes a door. On the contrary, that is when other doors can open, if we have the courage to walk. I started with small steps. I took up forgotten hobbies, visited places I had always wanted to see, accepted invitations I used to refuse, out of fear I wouldn't be okay. Each experience reminded me, I can still live. It's not that the pain vanished, it's still here, like a scar. But I learned scars are not signs of weakness, they are marks of survival. Today I understand my life is not defined only by the label excluded mother. I am more. I am a woman who loved, who fought, who endured. I am someone who, even after being pushed into silence, found her voice. I began making new plans, not plans based on what I lost, but on what I can still build. I planned trips, reconnected with friends, allowed myself to dream again. And in every dream there was the certainty that I am not condemned to live in emptiness. I also learned to look at other mothers with more tenderness. When I see someone boasting about her children, I feel a pang, yes, but I also feel compassion, because life can change in an instant. When I meet women who carry wounds like mine, I offer what I can, my shoulder, my listening, my story. I discovered that sharing does not diminish pain, it transforms it, and by transforming, it creates space for something new, hope. I don't know what the future with my son holds. Maybe one day he will knock on my door, repentant. Maybe he never will, but today that uncertainty no longer paralyzes me. I learned I cannot live waiting for a return that might never come. I must live for myself, with or without him. And that is the greatest lesson I carry from this road. A mother's love never dies, but it cannot be a prison. I continue to love. I always will. But I will not let that love destroy me. I move forward with dignity and courage. I wear my scars like medals of war, and I know that even without his presence, my life has value. What once felt like the end I now see as a beginning. A painful beginning, yes, but a necessary one. The road ahead is still long. There will be days of longing, nights of tears, but there will also be sunny mornings, unexpected laughter, embraces from people life will still bring my way. I walk with steady steps, even if they sometimes tremble. I walk because I deserve to. I walk because existing is my right. I walk because no exclusion can erase who I am. And if one day other mothers hear my story, I hope they find in it not only pain but also strength. That they understand being forgotten does not mean being small. That exclusion is not the end, it's a turning point. That each of us carries within the capacity to bloom, even after being buried by silence. Because deep down this is the truth I carry with me. They may have tried to silence me, they may have tried to erase me, but I am still here, and I press on, because seeds, when buried, do not die, they are reborn. This was my story, a story of pain, of being left out, but also of finding a way to begin again. I know many mothers have gone through or are still going through something similar, and now, I want to ask you, have you ever felt forgotten, pushed aside, or hurt by the very person you loved the most? Your voice matters too, and you're not alone. If these words touched your heart, don't keep them just for yourself. Share them with someone who may need to hear them. Sometimes, a story can be the gentle reminder another mother needs to know that her invisible scars are seen.